Hello, and welcome to another Agent is In. This is episode 62. Today, I want to show you something that I've been playing around with. It's not something that you can grab for yourself. It's something you could make for yourself, though. So we'll see how that goes. I really wanted to get some feedback and see what kind of ideas some other people had. So that's kind of, hopefully it'll be a little bit more talkative session. But I have this little test environment that I guess I'm not sharing with you. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen now? Great. Yeah. So I've got a small test environment with 3 hosts, and I've got a problem. One of these hosts has outdated reporting data. Yes, I'll be Chicago. So this host here had its last report collected recently. The times are GMT. But the last execution timestamp for the agent was quite some time ago. So I want to look into this, and that kind of brings us to the thing that we're looking at today. I've been working a little bit on an MCP server so that we can do stuff like show me the status of my fleet in mission portal. So here I've got a couple of different agents running. I'm using Hermes with a local model, Quen 3.6 35B mixture of experts. So that local model takes about maybe less than 20 gigs of VRAM to run that. But I wanted to see, I want to practice this stuff on kind of dumber models. It works totally fine on frontier models. But here we can see that I have the MCP server for Mission Portal that I've been working on loaded, and it's loaded the skill, and it's starting to look up the fleet health here. So here we go. Fleet health. Can I move this sideways? All right. 3 agents are reporting fine, but as it highlighted here, there is some problems on the hub. The memory isn't high enough for what it wants for Postgres. That's okay. And then we have the same flag toast where this agent hasn't been run recently. It's been a while since it's run. The other 2 hosts are clean. So then kind of the next thing that I think would be interesting here is, well, why isn't that host running? Why isn't that host executing? Investigate the history and correlations around the time it stopped reporting, or it stopped reporting agent executions. So one of the things that this MCP server does, it's got way too many tools in it. I think there's over 100 tools in it right now. But one of the things that it does, I was having some success when I had exposed just talking to the API directly, or, having like automating some scripts or doing something else. But that just having API access makes it more difficult to do, I guess, more complex queries. So a lot of these tools have a lot of more complex queries, and queries that slice across time and do a bunch of things kind of baked in, so that your agent's not having to reproduce those queries. And I think that's probably where the value of MCP comes. I've spent most of my time with agent skills, which have kind of typically a lower token cost for working with. Here we go. Okay, so it has run and looked up health diagnostics, Federation says host info for it, inventory attributes. Did that a couple of times. Audit log. We'll see here. And then, maybe at the same time, I should ask something smarter over here. What is the status of my fleet health? If any hosts have issues, investigate what be related to any issue. Let's see here. Oh, wants to do SQL query. All right, let me drop to regular terminal. It's a little bit slower inside of Emacs. There we go. Investigate host 01, see why it's not running CFEngine. So, and is this running over here? Yeah, let me just do it over here though. Look up, let me make this text bigger. The status of my fleet health. Investigate any issues, what may have caused it. Yes, you may talk to Mission Portal. Okay, here we go. 3 hosts, all still reporting, 2 distinct to investigate. Yes, go ahead and do that. Investigate both of those. So again, this is my local model over here on the left. It's much, much slower, much, much dumber. Call Mission Portal twice. Forensic. Here we go. What's this? Host change. Timeline. Yes, do that. So Claude thinks he's getting into something. And then my Hermes agent over here seems to maybe have gone out to lunch. I mentioned before, there are way too many tools exposed from this MCP server. I think over 100 right now. I need to whittle it down dramatically. That is contributing to the slowness here and kind of everything kind of going off sideways, looking at different tools, I think. Here's the full picture. Trigger another agent run.
Can you increase the font on the left-hand side?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, this one is just lied completely. It is running. 5 evaluations. What happened? Here we go.
Okay.
I think Claude's going to get it first, though. Conclusion. Earlier burst of repair promises. Okay, yeah, this one went off the rails. It did pick up on part of it, though. Here, so this is the last, so it picked up the information from the last reported execution from that host. And there's a leading indicator here that shows a user login, like a mount point. So somebody is logged in here. And then over here, let's see what Claude came up with. Here we go. Yeah, Claude did it. Hermes did this yesterday a couple of times, but like I said, it's a lot dumber. All right, so that host went dark right after there was an unauthorized account created, right? So what do we see here? So the host was booted, and then 10 minutes later or 5 minutes later, there was a new account for S Palpatine that was created. Etsy shadow changed. 5 minutes later, a password was set for that account. File integrity checksum alerts were raised. And then the agent completed its execution. And then the agent stopped, right? So the agent was able to derive the chain from the reported data of like, hey, it's all login, a user creation, kind of like outside of the scope of policy execution, and then and that's it.
So you need to add a tool to SSH to the host?
Yeah, I suppose. Like that would be something we could do. We could do some other stuff like set up a local build project on the portal hub and add relevant security related build modules and deploy. All right, so since Claude got it right and Hermes didn't, I guess we'll stick with Claude. Sorry, local model. We'll come back to you later. Schlepping. Oh gosh, that was a big ask, maybe. Okay, wants to refresh the build index. Yep, you can do that. Yes, while it's doing that, I can say I'm just going to ask it to do that again because we're already waiting for one agent. Might as well keep the other one busy. Oh, here we go. Security module catalog. So it wants to create this build project. Yes. And list the project modules. All right, so it initialized the master files there with 327.1 base. And now it's adding inventory local users, looking for empty passwords, a bunch of other modules. Auto resolves dependencies. Yes, it will. Looks like it's adding the modules. I have this here. Curious if we go over here and look at build, if we'll see this local module starting to get, we should see that it's getting set up. Oh yeah, here we go. So it's initialized this local project. We've added a bunch of various inventory, Linus, some other local inventory. And now, oh, I missed what I think it's doing to deploy. Go look at the hub here. We should, no host specific data there. Still calling mission portal. Okay, all 15 modules staged. 11 picks, auto resolve dependencies. Okay, explicitly asked to deploy, proceeding. Here we go, build deploy project 1. Yes, proceed. That other agent's trying to get into a VM. Deploy not set, operation gated off. Oh, no, I don't want you to go doing that. Is it not? It might not be done. Let me just hit it here. Deploy locally. So that's kind of what I've been playing with. What do you think?
Yeah, it's cool.
Kind of slow.
Cool.
Any
very cool, Nick.
thoughts, ideas? Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So which model did you use and how did you feed it the knowledge? So how did Claude acquire the CFEngine knowledge?
Well, I have all of the CFEngine context like accessible to it. But for this in particular, this is so there's an MCP server that AI wrote for me over the course of, I don't know, off and on for maybe a week or something like that. That I kind
of. Could you show us could you show some of the AI of the code part? What you did? So the cloud setup. So the knowledge parts, etc.
Well, so for that, I mean, when I was building the MCP server, I was giving it documentation for all of the APIs, documentation for all of the SQL databases, but I also gave it all of our enterprise source code to look at, so that anything that was perhaps not up to date in the docs or anything like that could be cross-referenced with the behavior in the code. So with
guess what? It found some errors in the source code, right?
No, it stayed. I mean,
Oh, no.
it stayed on track. It stayed on track with like the task of building this MCP server. So you know, and I started off with just kind of first you know, authentication, like, hey, I want this process to run. I want it to use my credentials to authenticate with Mission Portal. And then I want it to kind of pipe through the API calls, right? So like the first thing that I built was nothing, basically, right? Just a pipe to be able to access the raw APIs. But that wasn't that didn't provide any extra benefit. I mean, because I already have all of that same knowledge and context on how to access the API. So the more interesting and valuable part, I thought, or I was thinking, I'm not sure because, you know, still experimenting, but it seemed like it was more interesting and useful to have these bits of code that can do more programmatic querying, right? So it knows how to like look up and do more cross references and more so than just like saved and than just saved queries. So then I started moving from like, okay, just exposing the raw API to starting to build like very specific tools for specific things, like, you know, build a timeline of events for this host, right? So like I want to see the history of information that's in the database about this host across classes that are reported and then not reported, and variables and inventory attributes and things like that, so that it can build a timeline for each host and then do comparison and, you know, other tools to kind of take that data and compare it with each other and correlate it. So that was the process of getting there. But like I said, I was already using, you know, AI to help me do a lot of these same things. It's just that it was having to compose all of the SQL query, basically, you know, to do most of those more robust and very interesting queries. You need more than just a simple SQL query. You need a robust, a larger query or multiple queries and something to kind of stitch things together and make some decisions, especially if MySQL isn't so good at times, which it's not. That makes sense?
Okay. Yeah, yes, okay. For sure.
I guess I'm curious, right? And then so I moved on, like I started there with, and then exposing up some information. And then from there, I moved on to the more dangerous stuff, the right side of things, right? So be able to change settings and things like that. So that was the process of building it. But I'm very curious as to like what kinds of questions do you want to ask? of a bot, or what kind of instructions do you want to talk to your LLM that it's going to get from Mission Portal, from that enterprise information.
Well, you could do various things. You could focus on, for instance, performance. You could validate code, CFEngine code.
So
those are different directions.
Yeah, right? that is, yeah, that's kind of a different direction. And I've got other stuff for that too, like agent skills for helping write CFEngine policy, and I've also got a language server built on top of a lot of the tooling that the team has been working on, the tree sitter grammar and things like that. So I've got a language server that works with CFEngine grammar, and that language server I hook up to LLMs for a couple of different things. So that if I say, hey, write some policy, it knows how to check it, and then use the various CFEngine tools. Also, some of the LLM tools themselves, like for writing a file. So I used the language server and connected that to Hermes write tool. So when it writes a file, it knows automatically that it's a CFEngine file, and then it'll load the language server and do the syntax check, or it'll run CFEngine lint on it to validate the policy. But yeah, that's like a different direction. There is some stuff in this MCP server, because when I was looking at trying to like analyze causes of failure and things like that, or if I was looking at behavior of the policy on an infrastructure and then looking to change policy, it was interesting to be able to do something like how do I lowercase a string in CFEngine. We'll see if this finds it. So there is some stuff in this MCP server as well. I took dumps of all of the syntax descriptions from 3.6.6 to 3.21.7, and that.
Okay, well, there's this function for this in CFEngine.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And here it is. There's a string downcase function, right? So, but when I just asked the LLM without this MCP server, right? Or before I added this specific functionality to the MCP server, it was just hallucinating all day. It was just returning Python and JavaScript function names all day. So I built this so that when you're asking about things in the language, like in this MCP server, if you ask something about the language, it uses that syntax description, compares it against versions and things like that, and then it can do lexical similarity to figure out that, yeah, if you're asking about lowercasing a string, the string downcase function. So that is like the one policy writing side of this MCP server, at least in its current state. But absolutely, combining MCP server that has access to look at the infrastructure and get the information back kind of as it flows into the server, because it can just sit there and watch it on a loop as you're doing something, and check on how that policy that you just deployed worked out on those canary hosts, and then you would know whether or not to move forward onto something else. And then as you're maybe having it write some policy for you, it might be using language server and some other tools to keep those things on track, so that it's not hallucinating, function names and things like that. Is there any? So yeah, so this example was kind of like, a compromise thing, right? Like, hey, look at this thing, and then use a timeline to try and figure out like what may be related to that thing. But are there what other information would you want to ask about your infrastructure or do about your infrastructure? Or are you more just focused on how do I get it to write policy?
Well, let me give an example from my own practice. I was able to nuke my configuration on various machines by introducing a new policy. So how can I use this AI to prevent me from doing this, so that I can use the AI to, well, to in fact check my policies?
Yeah. I mean, my experience has been just kind of turning that lens at the policy. So, as far as context, right? I build things like skills for different things. Like, as I start off really stupid, right? With a dumb prompt. Just write me a policy for this thing. And I know what's going to come out as trash. But I go and I pull that up and then go through that and then correct the LLM on all these things. This is not a good way to do this. This is a better way to do this, or find a more efficient way to do this. Right? I've done that with some policies as well, where it's like, okay, this policy is fine, but run it through the ringer and find a different way to do it, different functions to use, different resource utilization profile, and I've had success with speeding up some policies. But it is in my experience, it's always a process of working through the bad example, the good example, and then kind of after I've done that, then like, hey, create, update whatever skills I need to create or update, kind of to encapsulate whatever we just went through, and then it has a much higher chance of succeeding the next time if that skill is available. And then, again, access to all the resources it needs. So, I mean, clone the docs locally. It's much more efficient to search docs and source code locally than it is to go web fetching every file from a HTTPS Git, repo. So, I mean, as far as some simple things that I do.
Well, bothered me most in writing policies is making use of variables that turned out to be no variable.
So where you're writing, so your policy is referencing a variable that's not defined?
Yeah, for instance, it turns out to be not defined because it, for instance, cannot find an IP address or something like that.
Is it because the variable doesn't resolve? That's why? Because there's like a typo in the variable name?
No, it's just not there. So it should be there, but it isn't there.
So maybe it could be something like environmental, maybe, right?
There's
for instance, a missing interface. You have a configuration with 3 interfaces. So you count on the very fact that all the 3 interfaces are there, but one is missing, one way or another. Or there is an error in an IP address. So you have a coded IP address somewhere, and you try to use it, but it turned out to be malconfigured or malformed. Stuff like that.
I wanted to say that there was an option. I thought that there was an option to the agent which would show you or warn if you're using variables that aren't defined at the end. I'll have to look. I am not seeing it right now, but I have recollection. But I mean, as far as that goes, like for authoring policy with the agent, some of the policy authoring skills that I have include things like instructions for running CFEngine CLI lint, or run CF promises against the file right after it's modified. Run CF promises against the policy set before I try to deploy it. This, and then also other tools like CFEngine CLI to have it lint and maybe format the policy files that it's writing. And then a different skill which allows it to manage an environment so that it can actually run and do those tests, right? Give it a way to bring up an environment and actually exercise the policy, because that's how it'll know what it's going to look like in that environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I will try to do some AI with my own CFEngine policies in the near future, and I'll find some examples of problems I had with variables in the past.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and
those
are all great things. Like any of the type of issues that you run across. I mean, right now, my advice would be, package those little bits of experience into a skill that you're using for when you're writing policy. The experience that you're having where these variables aren't there when you were expecting them to be there might be something that is kind of localized to your environment and the way that you're doing things, or it might be something that's more generic. It's hard to say, because everybody does things.
You know me, it's related to my setup.
Yeah, but absolutely. Being able to just like spin up a test environment. So there's the CFEngine CLI has CFEngine up, a new command there for bringing up an environment, I think. CFBS has some spawn stuff there as well. There's some other CFEngine tooling. But I often just use like the Vagrant environment. I'll download that, Vagrant up. That'll bring up a hub and a client. It's a really, small, good, isolated testing environment that it can then just deploy policy to, run a test, check the results, and be able to actually iterate. All right. Well, I think that's all I've got to share. There's no other questions. Remember, hang around after the show for off-the-record chit-chat. Otherwise, thanks for coming, and we'll see you next time.